ban on marijuana users from owning guns is unconstitutional, a judge says. Federal judge banning guns for marijuana users unconstitutional. Those are just a couple of the headlines on a story out of Oklahoma, and this is something that's happening across the country when it comes to reaction from courts to the ongoing fallout of a U.S. Supreme Court challenge out of New York that was decided last summer. Welcome back to Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. You can always chime in live and local at 217-629-7970, or you can email bishoponair@gmail.com. This is just one of the many cases that there are across the country that are being impacted by the U.S. Supreme Court decision of what's called the Bruen case. And everybody pointing out that the Bruen decision ultimately means that you can no longer use this kind of balancing of, well, the public safety aspect. Is that enough to outweigh and negate somebody's constitutional civil liberties, like the Second Amendment? And Bruen, essentially, that case says you have to look at the text and tradition, and no longer are these balancing rulings going to be the precedent. So that has been now rippling across the country with different cases, including, again, out of Oklahoma, a case that dealt with an individual who was stopped, had a loaded handgun, but also had marijuana in his vehicle. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But another case that we touched on Friday could have other impacts as well. This one coming out of a court in Texas, where a federal court ruled it's unconstitutional to ban Americans accused of domestic violence from possessing firearms. Now, this is always seems to be the case where you've got these various challenges to people who are being charged with crimes, and in this case, out of Texas, it highlights how the suspect here, Zachary Rahimi, was in a car accident of some kind, involved in 5 different shootings, including a shooting in the home of someone who had just bought narcotics from him. After being involved in a car accident, he shot at the other driver and fled the scene, only to return and shot at the other driver's car. He also fired his gun in the air after his friend's credit card was declined at a restaurant. So obviously this person is not somebody who should have a gun, but he had a charge that included being somebody who was under a domestic protective order, therefore not allowed to have a gun. Well, the judge in this particular case found that that is a violation of the Constitution, and for those who are accused of domestic violence, they should not be limited in their Second Amendment. So this is something that's going to impact a lot of red flag laws, or at least it's expected to impact red flag laws, including in Illinois, where they just expanded the gun restraining order, the firearms restraining order, from 6 months to a full year. And this deals with, of course, whether or not somebody has, say, a concerned loved one who says this person has firearms, they might be a danger to themselves or to others. Please, we need to get the firearms out. So a judge will hear that and then move forward. But you also have instances, and these are civil issues, these are not criminal issues. You have other instances of maybe you're in a marriage and it's not going well and you're getting a divorce, and then say the spouse who wants to seek some kind of revenge then says, you know what, I'm going to get a restraining order against you and have them take your firearms. Well, you're not found guilty of anything in this civil manner, but it's still something that across the country in various states, there are laws, red flag laws, as they call them, that are allowing for individuals' firearms to be taken away while the civil order is dealt with. So interesting to hear that. Again, the headline, appeals court finds federal gun ban on domestic violence offenders, those who are accused of it, is unconstitutional. So we'll see how that plays out. But to this story about the Oklahoma case, a ban on marijuana users owning guns is unconstitutional, a judge says. So from Reuters, they say a federal law prohibiting marijuana users from possessing firearms is unconstitutional. The judge, Patrick Wyrick, an appointee of former Republican President Donald Trump Friday, dismissed an indictment against a man charged in August with violating the ban, saying it's an infringement on his rights to be able to bear arms under the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment. The judge wrote that while the government can protect the public from dangerous people possessing guns, it could not argue that the plaintiff in this case, or defendant, I should say, his mere status as a user of marijuana justifies stripping him of his fundamental rights to possess arms. They say that cannot be argued. He went on to say that using marijuana was, quote, not in and of itself a violent, forceful, or threatening act, and noted that Oklahoma is one of a number of states where the drug, still illegal under federal law, can be legally bought for medicinal users. The mere use of marijuana carries none of the characteristics that the nation's history and tradition of firearm regulation supports. So that's what the judge had to say. Another report here from the Associated Press unpacks this a bit more, saying that the defendant in this case, Jared Michael Harrison, he was charged after being arrested by police in Oklahoma, May 2022, following a traffic stop, during which a search of his car found a loaded revolver as well as marijuana. Harrison told police that he had been on his way to work at a medical marijuana dispensary, but he did not have a state-issued medical marijuana card. His lawyers had argued the portion of federal firearms law focused on drug users or addicts was not consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation, echoing the U.S. Supreme Court's rule last year in the case known as New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. That case set a new standard for interpreting the Second Amendment. Federal prosecutors had argued that the portion of the law focused on drug users is consistent with a long-standing historical tradition in America of disarming presumptively risky people, namely felons, the mentally ill, and the intoxicated. But again, the judge argued that the ruling ultimately says that it's unconstitutional to prohibit individuals who are simply in a class of individuals known as marijuana users, that it's unconstitutional to prohibit them from their Second Amendment right. So interesting to see this, and of course, the Reuters article notes that the U.S. Department of Justice not responding immediately to a request for comment, but it's considered that they'll likely move to have this case appealed. So what happens here? Will that go to the U.S. Supreme Court? Is this going to be precedent setting across the country? Kind of fascinating to see some of these cases outside of Illinois dealing with other issues other than mere possession of firearms. But what about certain individuals who may have accusations of domestic violence? They're not convicted, but they may have accusations. Should they be kept from their right to keep and bear arms? You're innocent until proven guilty. But is that one of the things that can keep people from having firearms? What about cannabis use? Some noting that cannabis, while it's still federally illegal, is a very commonly used drug. So is that something we're going to see all across the country play out with these rulings reflecting what the U.S. Supreme Court had to say in the New York case last year? Kind of fascinating, and of course we'll be watching all of that because those are just a few of the other cases outside of, we've got the Maryland gun ban we're watching to see ultimately what happens there, and that could be instructive moving forward in Illinois when it comes to the gun and magazine ban. But again, other elements, different facets of the Second Amendment and how it's being impacted across the country. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Anytime you want to get a hold of me, you can do so live and local, 217-629-7970, or you can email me, bishoponair@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air, especially YouTube, where you can watch live and find clips of the show. Be sure to like and subscribe to get the latest, and also you can see us streaming on WMAY News on Facebook as well.